guys. Okay, so today we're going to talk about fractions on a number line. So I went ahead and set up my board, and if you guys will, go ahead and open up your journals to your next clean page and write number line at the top. And so we're going to do a little bit of number line practice before you go into your math ed assignments. So go ahead and draw me one number line. And the rule in my classroom is pink line to pink line in your notebook, because that way we can keep all of our number lines lined up exactly the same. You cannot compare number lines when they do not, when they're not equal. So let's get started. Typically, most of your number lines are going to start at 0 and end at 1. You will get some that are larger. Remember, this is just like a slim little part of a huge infinite line between 0 and 1, and we're just representing parts of one whole. So it could be anywhere, more than 1. It could be all the way up to 100. It's just kind of like a zoomed in little snapshot. So let's start with this one. Let's say you get a number line and they tell you they want you to split it into, let's say, fourths. That one's easy. First thing you do is you start by drawing a line in half. Okay, that way you can automatically get the right spatial reasoning. And I always go ahead and identify it as 1/2, even though I know I'm going to identify it with a different denominator later on, because I like to remind myself that a half is equivalent to a lot of different fractions. Okay, so when you make a fourth, you take your halves and you cut them in half, because really all you're doing is multiplying them by 2. So I take my half and I cut them in half again. And now I go to label. This is 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. This is a number line that is split up into fourths. This one's super easy. This one should be the one that you can draw and identify at all times. And then typically what they're going to do is they're going to put dots and letters on different parts of a number line. And they're going to ask you to represent or tell me what fraction A represents. And you have to be able to say, oh, it's 1/4. Or what fraction does B represent? 3/4. The tricky one that we've been seeing a lot more often this time is identifying the interval between A and B. So how many fourths are they apart? 2/4, right? So sometimes that can get a little tricky as well. Be careful. They're trying to mess you up. Another thing that they might do is they might give you a number line with all of the tick marks in between, but not identify what the fraction is, and you would have to identify it on your own. Say like this. Like this. They would say, what fraction on the number line does C represent? Well, they're giving you a lot of different options here. Not options, I guess they're giving you a lot of chances to make your own decisions here. So the first thing they want you to do is identify what the number line is split into. So you start at 0, and you start jumping 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This fraction, or this number line, is split into sixths. When you do that, then go back and identify each part of the number line. Right? Good so far? Then you can identify that C is on 4/6 on the number line. Not too shabby, right? The other thing I wanted to represent with you is one more thing, is a blank number line. A lot of times they're going to have you compare fractions using number lines. And the one thing that I try to reiterate to all of my students is to find what we call benchmarks. Always tell yourself, you can kind of tell yourself where on the number line something might fall. You should be able to find out what half is no matter what the denominator. because you can always cut the denominator in half in your head and identify what the numerator would need to be. Then also try to identify where fractions would fall on a number line. Maybe closer to 0, closer to a half, or closer to 1/2. If you were to compare fractions like 2/6 and 3/4, I would want my kids to look at it first and say, okay, well, the numerators and the denominators are wrong here. So let's think of them based on their benchmarks. I know that 2/6 is only 2 tick marks away from 0. I also know that 3/6 is equivalent to 1/2, which means that 2/6 is going to be on the left side of the number line. Then I look at this one, 4ths. Again, I'm only 1/4 away from 1/2. But with 2/6, I was closer to 0. I also know that 4ths, if I were to cut them in half or see what half of 4 is, I'd say 2. So 2/4 is equivalent to 1/2, and I have more than 2/4. Therefore, I know that this fraction is going to be on the right side of the half. With all that being said, I have a pretty good idea of which fraction is bigger and how to compare these two fractions. But luckily for me, I can go back to a problem that I've already done and I can plot them on that number line. Remember that. Don't erase your number lines. In fact, you can use them again and again and again when comparing fractions if you've lined them up pink line to pink line on your paper and you don't have them all scrambled up on your paper. So let's look. 2/6, well, that's right here. 3/4, well, just like I said before, 2/6 is much closer to 0. 3/4 is much closer to 1. It's pretty obvious to me that 3/4 is larger on the number line. So hopefully you remember these tips for success, and good luck. Today you're going to be working on your representing fractions on a number line in your Math Ed Module 13 lesson. Let me know if you need any help. Bye!